With Age of Calamity's final DLC now out, I was really hoping it would bring the necessary changes to the game that really needed tuning. From a lack of unique weapons for characters besides Link and Zelda, to adding more substance to the story outside of Terrako being the sole reason Hyrule won in this timeline. But, sadly, the Guardian of Remembrance DLC just added more of the same. It takes place before Terrako met Zelda and sometime after. Not really adding any new story to the game, but more so recapping things from the past. So with a whole year gone by after the official release of the game, I expected this DLC would have added more to it. But it really added nothing. And compared to the post-DLC content we got for the original Hyrule Warriors, from tons of new adventure maps to play through and actual new content going over Sia's side of the story, Age of Calamity really seems lacking in comparison. And look, I don't want to hate on this game. I actually really enjoyed the gameplay for the most part, and can appreciate the fact that this game heavily uses assets from Breath of the Wild. From the game's similarity in graphics, to its menus and items, to even the locations and overall setting and music. And for real, the music is so damn good. It's honestly the best thing to come out of this game. Koei Tecmo has been known for their heavy metal sounding music in their Warriors series, and the original Hyrule Warriors really represents that with so many amazing metal remixes to iconic tracks. But Age of Calamity takes it a step further with the music that sounds like it comes straight out of an actual Zelda game. The game is full of outstanding tunes that were a delight with each and every time I played it. But outside of appreciating the game for its graphics, soundtrack, and overall setting it gives, the lack of quality that went into the game's writing and overall replayability is a huge letdown. I actually got a comment on my initial review for this game, which I suggest you check out if you haven't, but it perfectly summarizes my feeling towards this game. Like, I feel like people don't understand how Nintendo first marketed this game and how it played a big effect on fans coming into it. They advertised the game and barely showed Terrako until the demo came out, to let fans think that the game would be canon. Look, I get they wanted to subvert our expectations with Hyrule winning this time around. Okay, that's cool and all, and if Terrako had to be the key in order for all of this to happen, that's also understandable. But when you downplay the importance of Link, the fucking protagonist of the game, and have him overshadowed by it, you take it a step too far. Outside the main game focusing so much on Terrako, the DLC was about him as well. Hence the name of the DLC being called Guardian of Remembrance, because Terrako is that guardian. Link had no special level throughout the DLC or moment whatsoever. Outside Terrako, we got missions that had to do with the 4 present and 4 future champions, further adding a connection to them with very stereotypical anime-like cutscenes of each of them interacting. Like, the amount of laughing they do for nothing is absurd. Like, think of seeing this cliche outside of anything but anime. It would be awkward. And I understand the game isn't canon, but why retcon something from the original game? For example, with how Urbosa was able to snap Master Koga after he put on the Thunder Helm. Like, couldn't have she done any other move? The Thunder Helm is known to prevent its wearer from being struck by lightning. How did they not think this through? And seeing Sidon save his baby self, like, I know Sidon is a fan favorite and I do really like him as a character, but come on, who wrote this? None of these cutscenes felt satisfying to watch, and it just butchers their character from how we knew them in Breath of the Wild. They become very one-note cliches that do things that are so predictable. And it's not like much really happens, as all of the DLC just kind of wraps things up in a very simple way. Even after you complete all the missions, you unlock Robbie and Purah, not both at the same time, as they are both one character. Yes, it seems Koei was too lazy to make movesets for both characters, so they combined them into one. You also unlock Suga, which was actually nice to see, but sadly he has no missions outside of his training ones to do. The one interesting scene you get from him is how he joined the Yiga clan when he was much younger, befriending Master Koga and becoming his servant. Probably the only interesting cutscene throughout the entire DLC. Regardless, once completing all the missions, it just ends. You wonder if there's a cutscene to wrap the DLC up, but nothing shows. I then realized the tedious memory quests they added are needed to complete to see the last cutscene. And this cutscene is sadly nothing you wouldn't have already imagined to happen. With the champions just chilling together and Link and Zelda also having a good time, but not much else. I mean, it's cool to see Zelda cook, but still, it's nothing new to take from. Somehow though, they managed to force in another scene with Terako making this fanfic really hammer home that Terako is the protagonist and not Link. And what I mean is, during the last scene in the final cutscene you unlock, you see Zelda about to head out, leaving the whole gang behind, except for that little motherfucker. Zelda asks him to join her as she jumps off like she's Link with the paraglider and sets out to do her own thing. Without Link. Like, why? Why is Link cucked by a little robot? Come on, couldn't have Link at least joined her as well? He is her appointed knight after all. You couldn't have said f you to the official cast of Zelda characters more than with this scene. As the Princess of Hyrule, the name the series is named after, chooses Terako over anyone else. Yet in Breath of the Wild's ending, we see Zelda and Link head off as they set out to bring Hyrule together. In Age of Calamity, apparently this alternate timeline also means Zelda no longer needs Link and sets out with Terako to do so. Like, I cannot explain to you how dumbfounded I was seeing this. I really didn't think Terako could have gotten more attention after the heroic sacrifice he made in the final battle. But nope. The OC character must be more important than the official cast of characters the story is based off of. Like, no offense, but fuck off, Koei Tecmo, with this bullshit. You gave us characters like Lana, Volga, Sia, and even Linkle in the first game, and none of them played nearly as important of a role as Link. Yet in Age of Calamity, you give us this little piece of shit who outshines every character in the game and is favored by Hyrule's princess. What happened? Like, I don't mind if this game isn't canon, but how could the writing be so bad? It's a shame this DLC only hammered in this horrible writing and added nothing to the story whatsoever. Because this isn't the ending to romanticize. We know Hyrule failed in Breath of the Wild because Zelda couldn't awaken her powers soon enough. Why couldn't it bring a deeper meaning to that with this alternate take? How things have now been changed all because of Zelda's power this time around, and not because of Terako. And we know the canon ending is that the champions die, and that Breath of the Wild 2 will only add to that story. So when this alternate ending doesn't even add much for being something new, and we know that this isn't even the true outcome, what's the point? What do we get from all of this? This isn't some sitcom trying to wrap up their characters with a happy ending. This was an alternate timeline where things were stopped from going bad, so why not explore more on that, rather than just focus on making the characters have this happily ever after. The gameplay, to no surprise, is just more of the same. You do a few missions of already past locations with a few additional new areas. Though honestly, none of these new areas really stood out to me outside of Kakariko Village. It was really nice to see it in Age of Calamity, but with how linear the village is, it made the level really weird to get around. Since you can't climb like Breath of the Wild, you had to walk down these really narrow pathways to get to each part of the level, making the level seem more of a chore to get around rather than how Warriors levels usually are. You know, a big expansive battlefield to run around. Overall, the levels were still somewhat fun to play through the first time around, but there were only a handful of new levels, so it didn't really last that long. Sadly, Koei's way of adding more time to the gameplay with the DLC levels was to add memory quests to each of the main missions. This required you to do very meaningless tasks that didn't add any challenge or fun to replaying them. For example, you had to find 4 wild berries in a level or 3 hydromelons. And I cannot stress how annoying these missions were. Firstly, they made no sense being called memory missions when you're just collecting random fruit. And secondly, they were no fun to do whatsoever, especially in a warrior-styled game. You had to run around and hit every single box in order to find the right one. It seemed like a chore more than anything. The rest of these missions weren't as annoying, but still nothing new or challenging that made you want to go out of your way to complete them. Regardless, in the end, you only got rewarded with that final wrap-up cutscene, which only pissed me off more, so I wasn't happy spending the amount of time I did to complete it. Honestly, I spent more time doing these memory missions and looking for them, rather than playing the actual DLC itself. So it really shows how little content there was, and how these were clearly added to pad the gameplay. On top of that, you unlock no special weapons for anyone. And the unlocks you do get from these missions were weapons that do 60 damage at level 1 for each main character. Sadly, I have weapons that do far more than that at level 1, so it makes these weapons not worth the time, as I will just fuse it into another, more powerful weapon. I felt like if they added Guardian-style weapons for each character, that would have been a really cool reward, but that would require Koei to make actual new weapon concepts for each character. And it seems if it ain't about adding to their new OC, then it's not worth the time apparently. The most we got were the 2 new playable characters, Purah and Robbie, and Suga. I know I just mentioned 3, but since Purah and Robbie are together, they are only considered as a single character, which as mentioned was a real letdown. And it really didn't make much sense in why they went that direction, as all Purah provides for Robbie is pressing a single button to have him perform special attacks. It just seems like a lazy way into integrating both characters into one without giving it a purpose. Like, why couldn't we at least have a tag team between the two if they were gonna be a single character unit? Maybe Robbie uses melee weapons like he already does, while Purah uses range weapons, diversifying their gameplay, making them a really complex character. Suga, on the other hand, is actually really fun to play with. He has his over-the-top attacks with his giant sword that makes him feel like the big, bad, tough guy of the roster. Sort of how Lu Bu fell in the Dynasty Warriors games. But unlike every other character, he wasn't given any story missions to play. So outside his 2 practice missions, there is no reason to play as him anymore. Which makes me question why the DLC couldn't be based on missions playing as these new characters, rather than Teriko and previous champions we already played enough as. Another thing I found extremely lazy with the DLC was the boss battles. It had you facing different forms of Ganon again and again, which got really annoying. No creativity was spent on these weird concepts that seem like rehashed versions of another. And it's sad to see, because the original Hyrule Warriors turned Ganon into the Super Saiyan 3 sexy beast, with him summoning henchmen from previous games, and even adding actual variety to his weapons. But in Age of Calamity, Ganon was either a giant piece of turd, or a turd with Super Saiyan hair. You can't convince me that these Ganon designs were any good. They are all just malice-covered objects that do nothing but attack when confronted. No dialogue, no motive, nothing. Just more of the same thing. Overall, my hopes for this DLC was just to add minor things like costumes for the many characters who didn't get any, or new weapons varieties for those characters, and some sort of replayability to the actual game. But instead it just gives us more of the same and doesn't feel like it was worth that year-long wait for this final DLC. So, in conclusion, if you didn't get the DLC and thought it would add to the experience, it doesn't. I don't think I ever recommended for someone not to buy a Zelda game, spin-off or not, because it's more Zelda content at the end of the day. But Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity shows that even if you slap Zelda on the cover and consider it a Zelda game, it can be just as shallow as other games that sell off their title alone. Like, please, go buy the original Hyrule Warriors instead. It has so much more content and is overall a way better experience than this game. While I did have some fun with Age of Calamity at moments, it was mainly because of the hack and slash gameplay all Warriors games are known for. And sadly, it doesn't get any better with the DLC. So if you end up trying the base game and find yourself enjoying it, consider it. But the DLC in no way fixes any problems the original game had. Hopefully we do get more Warriors-like spin-offs for the Zelda series, but they follow the route the original Hyrule Warriors went for, instead of the very limited route they went for with Age of Calamity.